Okay. So, welcome to our meeting today. And our subject is lifelong learning. And as I was thinking about this subject, a question came to my mind, which is what is it that helps me to keep on learning? And I don't know what would be your response to that. And there are various things for me which I can share in a minute, but I was just wondering, just from, as you hear that question, what is it that helps you or inspires you to keep on learning? Because you might say, well, after 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of experience and of doing so many things and being involved with so many activities and studying many things, you might say, well, I've learned enough as much as I want to learn. But actually, I think we all discover that actually there's so much more to learn. But what is it that helps this attitude of learning? What is it that facilitates that? So, Rhoda, did you want to share or no? Okay. Anyone who'd like to share, please feel free to either write or share. Anna, please go ahead.
I think it's curiosity. Curiosity for new topics, going into depth on all topics that one has just managed to scratch the surface because of lack of time, perhaps in our case because we were working hard. Now later on we have, at least I have more time to go into depth into new topics or old topics, and not superficially but more more in depth. And it's the constant desire to improve and to observe the world and to learn. It comes from curiosity, I think, and from the love, from the passion of novelty, but in a deep way, not just novelty superficially, but a new author is interesting, a new spiritual. Your talks have been wonderful to discover other people's spiritual life, and I think that you gave us all that possibility to grow and to be curious about other people's path. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, that's really definitely one of the very important aspects of helping us to keep on learning. Yeah, please, Marco.
Yes, for me, I have to say it is the taste of learning new things. There is some joy that I get when I discover, something new about myself, or some new connections, or simply I learn more about the world. Like, to give an example, I mean, in this period, I started to learn all the type of species of trees that are in my neighborhood. And every day I would try to learn one new species. And before they were just trees, but now I know that this is ailanto, this is robinia, and I feel like I know them a little bit better. And it gives me a taste of feeling more engaged with life. So I have a taste for learning. I love to learn different things. So.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I am agree with Anna and as well with Marco. And both things are important. And as Anna said, is curiosity. And as well, I think it's a taste, as Marco said, to learn something. But the most important thing for me, particularly, is to share with others what I think, what my knowledge can help to others. This is the most important thing. If I learn something, I love to share what I learned. This is in my particular case.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you. Yes, it's. I think it's one of those things that helps to make our human experience filled with meaning. You know, that when we're learning something new, when we're because learning is like receiving, isn't it? It's like you're receiving some wealth. You know, they say in India, they say, and maybe in other places, knowledge is wealth. And of course, it's not just knowledge, but it's when knowledge becomes wisdom and something that we can actually use because we have it, because we've absorbed it through whatever means that we've managed to. And I know for myself, the whole subject of learning, especially having grown up in gone to a school, at least in India, where the method of learning and or teaching is really by rote, you know, where you memorize everything. And so the idea of learning and studying has only, I think, more has become something that's been important for me and interesting and inspiring for me to think about it in that way only since I left India, I think, after I finished school, because before that it felt like hard work and something that you had to do and something boring and in any case you couldn't ask any questions because that was it and so once you memorized it, you knew it, and so there was nothing more to know. And so when I realized just how limited and limiting that way of learning and that attitude was, a whole new world opened out for me to begin to ask questions and to really, as Anna was saying, become curious about things, and that it's okay to want to know, and it's okay to not seem like you know everything, you know, because this is also very interesting attitudes, you know, that that I think can be very that can block the learning process and the receiving, where even in a conversation that two people may have, or more than two, where there's that sense that after the conversation, which can be a friendly, you know, with friends or with family or with anyone, that actually I know more than what I did before. And so it's an interesting thing to also see what is it that blocks me from learning. You know? And certainly for me, it was this sense of that, oh gosh, it's, you know, it's hard work and so on, and that there's only a limited amount to learn. And so I think I really enjoyed listening to what was shared before, and I'm just going to add three things that I think help me to continue learning once this new world opened out for me, in the sense of the possibility. You know, and so I think the first thing is the attitude of humility. You know, because even to want to know something means that you're assuming that you don't know it, you know, which is not just it's not something that we can take for granted, because I think it's a big thing actually, and a valuable thing. Just this thought, oh, I don't know. You know, to be able to say I don't know is an act of humility, and so not in the sense of dismissing something. Oh, I don't know. So not in that sense, but in the sense of really, that's a good question. You know, I want to find out. I don't know, and therefore I want to find out. And so the humility that is the foundation of seeing that yes, there's a lot to discover, and maybe it's humility because I see the reality, in the sense that maybe I have made many mistakes because I thought I knew. I remember very often I would think I knew the way how to get somewhere, and I knew it in part, but I thought I knew it, and so would often get lost. And so this is why they say part knowledge is dangerous, but what's even more dangerous is to think that you know something that you don't know. And so the humility is when you know that you don't know, and that it's okay. And so I think humility also comes from accepting that I do make mistakes, and that it's okay to make mistakes. Often one of the biggest fears that people have is the fear of making mistakes. And so it's actually, I think, in other words, the fear of not being perfect. And also the fear of the punishment that will come if you do make a mistake. And so the humility of saying, okay, I might make a mistake, and I have made a mistake, and I probably will make more, but I can learn from that. And so it's not a dead end. It's not something that is unfixable. But whatever happens, I can see that as the reality that, okay, I made this mistake, which means that I need to discover more about this particular thing, or about myself, or about the situation, or about the know-how for something. And so it's accepting that reality, accepting the thing as it is, and wanting something better. So I think, like someone shared earlier as well, was that the wish to learn is because I want something to be stronger, more powerful, more peaceful, more clear, so to understand more, so that I can then bring that into my life. And so this kind of whatever I learn means that it's not just a question of theory. And so in fact that's the second thing, I think, for me, is the thing that helps me to continue learning, is this thing of application. So a little bit like I think Sandra was sharing, that this wish to share what you know. And so sharing, at least in my experience, whenever I had to share something, especially when I first started sharing about meditation, that was when I realized just how little I knew about it, in terms of how little I could articulate it, and maybe the big gaps that there were between the theory and the actual practice. And so whereas I might have known the theory enough to get by, but when it comes to sharing and articulating and describing how it is for you, that's when the application of what I know comes in. And I find, and I think it's probably the case for everyone, that that the more you apply, the more you want to know. Because once you've tried something out, you then see how much more there is to discover. Because otherwise it's like, yes, for example, in the meditation is a classic example, that often we say, yes, I want to try and I want to experiment. But then when people actually do experiment, that's when maybe people realize that, oh gosh, yeah, I only understood this much, and I need to discover a whole lot more about it. And maybe often people get discouraged because thinking, oh gosh, there's so much to learn and I know very little. But actually we don't need to be discouraged, but rather than that, to say, okay, this much I know, this much I've understood, and wow, there's so much more to understand. And not just that, but I can understand it. And so I think the third thing, so the first one was humility, the second one was the application, so to experiment with it, and the third thing that helps me to want to keep on learning is in fact this enthusiasm. And I think all of these things actually came up in what people shared, and so the enthusiasm, the interest to understand more. And I think that is based on the belief and the certainty that I can learn, which is, again, it's not one of those things that certainly I took for granted. It was not something that I automatically knew that, yes, well, I can learn. Maybe certain things, as a young person starting off work, and I would my first few jobs were going from office to office, maybe 2 weeks in one office in UK, and then going to another office for another 2 weeks or a month, and just to fill in, absences for people. And so, of course, when you go from one organization to another, one office to another, you have to learn everything right from scratch, their ways and systems and so on. And so, in a sense, that kind of thing, I believed that I could learn very easily, and I did. And it was never a problem for me to start again. But to get to know myself, and to realize that I can get to know myself deeper and more than what is on the obvious, more than what other people tell me about myself, that opened out a whole new thing for me, where I then began to develop this enthusiasm and this interest in wanting to know more, in realizing that actually there's a whole lot more to discover, even in the shadow areas, that it's worth getting to know, it's worth facing my weaknesses, because that's when I learn about myself, and that's when I can choose what kind of response I want, rather than being subservient to things that I don't know, or to these unknown monsters that I imagine about myself. And so at least it's the known, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. And so at least I know the very worst about myself. And maybe I'm getting to know more about that. And I think it's as the topic for today, it's a lifelong learning. And it's incredible. I think a little bit like Marco was saying, in a sense, the joy of discovering something, even something that I don't like. So I may not experience it as joy in that moment, because it's maybe more shock rather than joy. But eventually, the joy of actually knowing myself, just that little bit more, being authentic, and not trying to hide or trying to deny things. And this helps me to see also and accept my specialities and my qualities much more. Because I remember this thing of you can't accept your specialities, because otherwise you get egoistic about it, you get arrogant about it. And so this was one of the things that was very deeply taught, at least in the culture that I grew up in, that you mustn't accept any praise, because you will just get arrogant. And so the hiding away from any kind of compliments or anything, rather than graciously accepting and then maybe surrendering it to God, but to accept that and say, okay, well, maybe yes, maybe it is a gift or a speciality, and to appreciate that in the self. And so being able to learn about my weaknesses and about my specialities, and wanting to continue to learn, and the enthusiasm that comes from this kind of discovery that, wow, I didn't know that there was all that in me, this tiny, invisible point of consciousness. How is that possible, that there's a whole world within me? And so this kind of interest and enthusiasm, I think, for me has been an inspiration to keep on learning and to keep on going, keep on discovering and listening and reading and sharing with each other. So I don't know if there's anything anyone would like to share, maybe anyone who hasn't shared yet about what is it that helps you to keep on learning. And then we can have, I have something I want to read, which a couple of things. So, okay. Anyway, anytime anyone would like to share, just to know that, please feel free. So I'm going to read a piece by Dadi Janki. And she talks about, the topic is of the pieces, the title of the piece is Learning. And she talks about some of the things that stop us learning, and some of the things that help us. So some things facilitate learning and other things destroy it. Arrogance destroys it. I know this already. I have this thought, and learning will stop. Also, being tied up in a million things will not help you get to the depth of one thing. You can't really change until you get to the depth of something. So getting to the depth means to understand it completely, which might take a very long time. And we might think that we've now understood this, and then something new comes up about it. And that's a surprise again, and that's okay. But this is the thing of being distracted, where I'm so caught up in everything around me that everything stays at the superficial level. So maybe I have my finger in many, many different pies, and so I'm trying to learn too many things at once. And sometimes that can be very distracting. Sometimes you might find yourself reading 10 books at the same time. I don't know if that happens to you, where there's maybe so much interest in many, many things, which is great, but then there's the spread out too thinly, and so it's difficult to get to the depth of something. And so it's about this kind of focus and concentration and giving the time and energy and the reflection to something in particular. And so when learning stops, there is no more change and no more progress. And the soul whose task it is to learn and change is bereft, meaning is left without. So this much I have understood, but tomorrow I will understand even more. This thought is a thought of appreciation for what has already been received. It is a good way to ensure that more will be received in the future. And so when I appreciate what I've received, then I'm ready to receive more. There's space for more. So there will always be the opportunity to learn for those who desire it. I think this is a very important thing, is to know that if I want to know something, then I will have the opportunity to understand it. And I remember this exercise that I think Marco had done with us once of just asking the question. And then it's like you ask the question, you formulate the question, and you release that, in a sense, into the atmosphere, into the, into the spiritual space. And the answer will eventually come, maybe in the least expected moments. But the important thing is to formulate what it is that I want to learn. What is it that I want to understand? And that will then come back to you like a boomerang. And so there will always be the opportunity to learn for those who desire it. Learn in such a way as to absorb the new and live it. That's being sensible, which is the aim of learning. So being sensible is like being wise, isn't it? And so to learn in such a way that I absorb it, absorb that new thing and live that. And so this is the bridging the gap between the theory and the practice, which is often a big gap, unfortunately. No, and so it's noticing when maybe I hear lots of nice things, and that, at least I find that's for me, that it's very easy to hear things. Very often there are talks online or really, really interesting things that are shared, and however, just by hearing it, sometimes we can be satisfied and think that, oh yeah, now I know that. But in fact, that is, I think sometimes they call it ear candy, so sweetness for the ears, but that's where it stays, So I'm just realizing that there are people have written in the chat, and so that's right. So Brita says, for me, it's a desire for change and growth that motivates me to study. Yeah, in fact, I think that's a very, very important motivation to keep on learning. This thing for this wish, this deep yearning to transform, to change, to grow, in a sense, to come out of the sometimes suffocating stuckness of being in a certain way, or maybe responding or having certain mindsets. And then Aldo says, being able to contribute whatever I have learned to others and the world, something that makes my life and the others and the life of others meaningful, something that has a purpose. Yes. So, and yes, so the motivation of learning is that then I can share that, then I can contribute that. So, and then Laura says, I completely agree with the lady that expressed her opinion verbally at the beginning. In the case of BK, I feel very attracted and inspired. Great, thank you. Great, so actually before we have the meditation, I wanted to read another thing. And this is something just a little bit longer, but it's very beautiful, and it's on humility. And it's just really to open out that first quality that that I was sharing in the beginning, which I think is one of the things that is very useful when it comes to learning, and as a pretty much as a prerequisite to even begin to learn, to begin to want to learn. So this is from a book called Inner Beauty by Anthea Church. And so she describes humility. So humility dismisses nothing, but takes even small things seriously. It is the recognition that whatever is in life and is in front of you is to be respected as something that will take you forward. Inside big things, there is sometimes little, but inside little, there is often enormity. Humility puts a hand out to nothing extra, but simply takes what's there, whether that be food or clothing or understanding. Sometimes there is a lot available, and sometimes only a little. It doesn't matter. So it's within humility, there's not the expectations of something else, something different, something more. Even when you understand nothing, there is no worry. For in humility, there is the trust that everything will come anyway at the right time to those who feel themselves to be the children of God. In any case, knowledge mistimed is as dangerous as ignorance. Humility is also the basis for building a carefulness and simplicity to create form. In it, there is no expectation of brilliance, and therefore accomplishment comes more naturally, unthreatened by what will be said or thought by others. So in humility, there's not the worry of what others will think, but you just continue as you are. And so humble people are lovely to be with, for beside them, one is at one's best, and yet, because they respect themselves, nothing done belittles them, but further speaks of their beauty, because the achievement is half theirs already. And so this is an interesting thing, that within humility, there is naturally embedded self-respect. And I think it's only people who have true self-respect who can actually be humble. It's only people who have true humility who can really have self-respect. And so this is this incredible combination of these two very powerful virtues. So every creative task needs humility behind it. For humility is plainness. On plainness, the colors and shape of the work are clear to see and mold. If a new world were to come, its vital need would be this quiet basis on which to form itself, a basis which could stay the same whilst things were changing. Humility is special, therefore, and yet at all times, its disguise is so ordinary. For when something valuable is forming, ordinariness and noise are sometimes needed to distract attention as it grows. Interesting one is that humility is very special, but until it becomes strong, in other words, until it's balanced with self-respect, it is vulnerable. And so sometimes, because humility is simple, looks under the disguise of being something ordinary. Someone who's humble looks very ordinary, nothing special. And so it's a disguise until that disguise is removed and it's ready to act and where it's needed. Because humility is needed in many places, many times. So the humility in a person, carefree of reputation, can wear the disguise easily so that nothing of the real work is seen. Humility is the willingness to be used in any way that is necessary, however out of character it may seem. In humility, individuality has been exchanged for the task it is involved in. Quietness in this case is an unquestioning acceptance of whatever has to be done. Humility is rare because to have it, you have to want nothing. If you do have it, you get everything. So there's a lot there, because and the way that the author writes is extremely subtle and extremely deep. But anyway, we can each take from that whatever we like, and so maybe we can now spend the next 10 minutes or so in a meditation, and go into the experience of this aspect of learning, and maybe reflecting on some of the things that help you to learn, and some of the things that maybe become a distraction, because things like very often when there's the wish to learn, then really boredom is something quite unknown, because you'll always find something to learn, to read, to discover, and however, what is it for me? What is it for each one individually that we can ask ourselves that maybe takes us into that kind of an inertia? Because one of the things that yes stops us from learning or wanting to learn is arrogance. So this thing of I know it already. Then there's the distraction, being distracted, having our interests spread too thinly. But I think the third thing is a kind of inertia, which can come in the form of a heaviness. So even though I might be interested and I really like it, I really want to know, but I just don't do it. I just don't get down to it. I don't practice it. I don't experiment with it. And so I think that can come due to a number of reasons, and some of them physiological, like checking the kind of diet that we have. Some kind of foods affect the digestive system in such a way that becomes sluggish, and so the way that how much clarity we have and how much energy we have is reduced. And so sometimes that can be the reason. Sometimes not enough rest. Sometimes some sort of imbalance in our physical movement or in our physical way of being, because whether it's food, exercise, and rest, and these three things, to get them in a balance is really not just that easy. But then also on the other side, sometimes we have inertia because or heaviness or sluggishness because we think that we can't do it, and so there's a kind of a mental block that that I'm not up to it, or procrastination, putting it off, and so on. And there's reasons behind that. And so I think we need to, when we feel that way, we need to just stop and have a conversation with ourselves, have a dialogue, rather than thinking that we shouldn't be feeling that way. But to, in a sense, using even that as an opportunity to get to the depth of something else that I can unblock or discover about myself. Okay, so let's prepare ourselves for a meditation. So maybe just readjust your position or find a comfortable place where you can just have that quiet time and take a deep breath. And feel all the muscles in the body relaxing. Maybe moving them a little bit and then letting them become still. So whether it's the feet or the legs, the arms and the shoulders, the neck, just to feel and then let go. So this is what we can do for the whole body, including the muscles in our face. So feel them with your mind, which means become aware of them. All the many, many, many muscles in the face. And then let go. So with my awareness, I step beyond the physical energy, beyond the sphere of influence. So beyond the pull of gravity of the physical environment. Because my consciousness, I, the living being, I, the soul, am beyond time and space. I'm not limited by the rules and the laws of nature. My body has to function according to the laws of matter. But I, the spiritual being, am not subject to that. And so I can take myself into an awareness that is beyond the physical, whilst being in the physical body. I can come into my inner world. I can visualize my inner dimension as I wish to. And right now, I choose my visualization, whether it is a beautiful room inside, so light, so peaceful, and welcoming, comfortable, secure, fresh and fragrant. Or whether I choose to be out in the open, in front of the sea, or in a forest, or in the fields by a river. Whatever I choose, I become fully present in here. I take a moment to describe this environment to myself. There are no limits. So whatever I choose to place there will become present. Whether it's animals, trees, water, wind, whatever it might be. And so I visualize this space. And as I'm visualizing, I begin to feel what it is. I begin to feel the sensations in my mind of peace, of relaxation, of clarity, of lightness. And within this inner space of my consciousness, I can come back to the awareness of who I am. I can observe the characteristics that are part of my personality. I notice the tendencies and the patterns, and I remain a detached observer, accepting and observing all without judgment, because I see clearly things as they are. And as I remain present in this space inside, I can feel my energies being replenished. The energy of peace. The strength of my foundation. The connection from here with the Supreme, with the source of love, the source of wisdom. As a supreme teacher and guide who can indicate very clearly the next step in my learning path. And every scene in my day and in my life becomes an opportunity to learn and grow and share what I've learned as a valuable contribution to others. I stay another moment in this peaceful, silent space. I take another deep breath. And very gently guide my attention, my awareness once again to the muscles in my body, to how I'm feeling, and to my physical surroundings. Thank you. So, if there's anything anyone would like to share from the meditation or from the conversation, we have a few more minutes. Most welcome. The important thing, I think, is to make that time to come inside, because we need that space to refresh and relax. Even from our continued lifelong learning, sometimes we need to take a break and enjoy what we've learned, celebrate what we've learned. Marco.
Yes, thank you for this beautiful readings and meditation. And I was reflecting on this attitude of humility that you just shared, because sometimes I feel that learning
Nice.
is something that life shows up as a teacher, and it is not our choosing, what we learn. I mean, if I reflect on the birth of my kids, what the learning that has emerged from that, or the death of my parents, there are lessons, I think, that we can learn every day, and if we are open, and if we are humble, as you said, and if we are willing to treat them as lessons that come our way, and these, I feel like, are lessons that we don't learn so much with our mind or our body, but we learn deeper, and so that is what stays with me after listening to you, the importance of having such humility and such openness.
Thank you. Yes, it's a great question to ask the self every day. What did I learn today? Simple question, but I think it brings that moment of reflection and refocusing. So great. Great. Well, I'll just here see some other comments. So, 2 pillars of learning for here is one side, that it needs to be something useful to learn, and on the other side, it needs to be something that could be passed on as a contribution, as all those. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Sometimes there's that sense, well, I don't want to learn why should I learn something that, may not be useful to me? And of course, we don't know when something could be useful. So thank you. Thank you, Radha. So since Laura, since I listened to these meditation, I feel better. So on one side, benefiting the self in a way and on the other side, benefiting others. Great. So thank you very much for your presence and for sharing, and we'll be together next week.